Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I am your host, Payman Ascari, and we have back with us my very good friend, Mr. Trevor Holsworth. A great Canadian who's unfortunately been on the receiving end of lawfare. Trevor, how are you doing?
Oh, good. Thanks, Payman. It's nice to see you again.
Are you hanging in there? Are you in high spirits, or is the
Oh,
government?
no, I'm in high spirits actually. I'm kind of I've crested the wave quite a while ago.
All right, I guess all the attacks from the government have hardened you.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of being there for sure. I'm experienced.
Well, I'm glad to have you back, Trevor. You've been on, we were talking earlier, once or twice officially you've been on as a guest on my show. And even I still to this day struggle to actually put all the pieces of your story together because it's seemingly very small. It starts with this one little court case involving perjury, but it's almost like you've woven your story's been woven into the decline and the collapse of justice in Canada.
Yeah, yeah. So um, yeah, it is it's an interesting story, and it's got many facets, and it goes right into the heart of a lot of the legal establishment and the political establishment, and it confronts everything that we think is true and right, and turns it right upside down, and um, and we see what's underneath the surface. But essentially, I experienced trial fixing and judge shopping in in a court case in a divorce situation back in 2005, 2006, 2007, and and then I just investigated it over the years and looked at it and so thought about it and considered it. And everyone, all the authorities shut me down. I complained to law societies and judicial councils, and they knew what the problem was, and they shut it down. And but they shut it down improperly. So that's what we're really confronting now. And yeah, if you want to correct me and pull me back on, rein me in a little bit there, or how are we doing, Payman?
Sure. Let me first of all, I thought I could turn my fan off. It's boiling here. Give me 1 second. So I'll keep it low and I'll keep my mic muted. Um, can you hear me, Trevor?
Yep, no
You,
problem.
okay,
Thanks.
you froze there for a second. Okay, so you and I, because I know your story relatively well. I went through and I created sort of a script to try to stick to. Now this is on X, and people can go and follow it as we're going through this. But I'm not going to keep this on here because it's like 5 pages long. I'm going to keep it on my screen. I'm going to keep an eye on this. I and every time you say something that might be a little bit too complicated for the audience, I'll intervene. Besides that, can you go ahead and start telling us your story of what happened, starting with just the perjury incident? I'm characterizing it as water is wet, water is dry.
Right. I mean, essentially, the lawyers knew that they were going that the evidence was against them, and they both worked together to fix the trial. And then they presented the evidence to the court, and I went to court because there was a lawyer who was not complying with court orders to provide trust account statements and had created a fraudulent court order. So they delayed the trial for a couple of months after it was supposed to have been heard to try to pull a bit more money from me. And then we went to trial, and I got the transcript from the
Sorry,
hearing.
Trevor.
Yeah.
Let's take it a step back and let's
Sure.
assume nobody knows what's happened here.
Oh yeah.
So you, um, the opposing lawyer said something that wasn't true, and you had the court documents and you tried to get him to correct it, but he didn't correct it, and the judge allowed that lie to stay in evidence or in
Yeah.
the official recording.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really want to make that one piece a big deal, because the big deal really is that they did the trial fixing. But what I did, they created a fraudulent court order, and I wanted to get that fixed. And I presented the transcript to the judge, and I said, "Look, this is what the judge actually said. this is what the court order says. It should be corrected. That would be fair. And the judge called the plaintiff to the stand and asked her what she heard the judge say 9 months ago, and preferred that to my evidence, the transcript, which is a clear demonstration of bias and partiality. Can't get worse than that.
I got to jump in again.
Go for it.
What is a court transcript? I think or court order. What did you say?
Well, the court order is usually a court order. It's created by the judge, but the lawyers write it up based on what the judge says. So I think the winning lawyer or the applicant lawyer writes it up, and then the other lawyer approves it as to form. So he approves that, yes, this is the way it should be. Now, what happens with self-represented litigants is generally the judge ignores them and tells the other lawyer, usually the government lawyer or a lawyer, to write up the court order. And as doing that, the lawyer is operating as an officer of the court. He's working for the judge. So they're under a duty to do their diligence there. So anyway, I asked him a couple of times to correct the court order before, and he never did, and he refused to, and manipulated things. And then, so I eventually went to court with the transcript and asked it to be corrected. So then you've got the complete inversion of the legal system. You've got a judge rejecting the transcript and preferring perjury to protect a lawyer committing fraud. Now, so does that make sense?
It does. So the court transcript, that's what the stenographer types away?
Exactly. That's the official document, the record of the trial. There is no better evidence than that, except for the court audio, which is the actual court recording.
Okay. So I'm going to really simplify this. And there was 2 judges, correct?
Well, there was one judge.
At the beginning, and then they got changed?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah, there's 2 judges. There was the judge that heard the original hearing, and then there was a judge later on that I was trying to get the previous the court order corrected from.
It's almost like Judge A says Mr. Holsworth is innocent, and the stenographer writes it on the transcript. Mr. Holsworth is innocent. The opposing lawyer writes the judge said Mr. Holsworth is guilty. That Judge A, whatever, he goes and retires. They bring in Judge B, and you show the transcript saying that Judge A said you're innocent. The court order that the opposing lawyer wrote says Mr. Holsworth is guilty, and Judge B brings, I guess your wife at the time, but the opposing lawyer's client on, and he's like, "Hey, what did you hear Judge A say?" Yeah,
exactly.
All right.
Yeah,
take it away.
It's totally wrong. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what we talked about the previous times that we talked, but anyhow, I followed all the correct procedures and contacted the BC Law Society and made a complaint about the lawyers and did that, and I made a complaint about the judge and to the Judicial Council. And so the Judicial Council comes back and says, "Yep, judges can do that. Judges can prefer fraud by a lawyer and ignore the transcript." And then the BC Law Society initially investigated it and were treating it fairly seriously. And then all of a sudden things changed, and all of a sudden it got dismissed, and everything's put away, and there's nothing more to be said, and that's it, which I didn't think was right. So
another question, you said, so this fraud that we're talking about, the discrepancy between the transcript and the court order, and could you tell the audience what exactly is the council? I think we skipped that step.
The council,
the council of judges, the Judicial Council.
Oh, sure. So yeah, okay. So the Judicial Council was established by Parliament after a sort of a disastrous investigation of a corrupt judge, or an allegation of a corrupt judge in 1971 called Justice Landreville. And so the judges said, well, you don't like doing it, we'll take over that job for you and we'll judge ourselves, and then you don't have to do it. And so Parliament said, "Oh, yeah, that sounds great. We'd love for you to do that." And so the judges, so they created the Judges Act, which had the Judicial Council established, and so they started checking the conduct of judges, and that's where you're right to complain if you have incorrect or a judge misbehaves or what have you. And it's all defined in the Judges Act how they're supposed to do it. And over time, the judges just made more and more exceptions for themselves with that. And same thing with the law societies. They just kept on pushing back against the citizen and say, well, we're going to say that we can do this now.
So what exactly did they use in the wording? You said that the Judicial Council said that a judge can use fraudulent evidence over the court transcript. They didn't use those exact words, right?
No, they said that the weighing of evidence is a matter of judicial discretion, so that the judge decides what evidence is valid or how much weight to put to every piece of evidence. And that's a great concept. And it was the concept of that came up out of the Marshall inquiry, which happened in 1990, where they were examining they were investigating a trial that had 3 judges involved, and there was allegations that things weren't quite correct in that. And they had an inquiry, and eventually they decided that judging judicial conduct, they should just not do it because we're equals. Judges are equals, and how can we judge another if we're equal? And this is an important concept to think of. Judging is inherently a claim of superiority. If we're both equal, how do I judge your conduct, Payman? Without you judging me. If you're going to be a judge, you have to be immune from being judged, right? So if you're judges, how do you judge another? And so what they came up with was this idea that discretion was unlimited, and the judge can weigh the evidence no matter what the evidence is. And that's just part of judging, which is true to some extent, except for what happens when you have corruption or stuff like that going on. And that's part of what the Judges Act covers, is what is inappropriate conduct. The Constitution, Section 99, says that judges have standing. They can be judges as long as they maintain good behavior. And then they expand that into the Judges Act, where they say a certain age and misconduct and these sort of things. But it's basically the judges took it over, and then they said, okay, we're going to make it unlimited discretion. And so when they came to my case, they looked at it and said, oh, well, the judge preferred this evidence over that evidence. That's a reasonable thing to do. Except it's not if you're comparing fraud and you've got the transcript and you're protecting someone with perjury.
Let me rephrase it. It's not reasonable if it's unreasonable.
Well, there you go. It's actually unconstitutional, right? Because the Constitution guarantees fair and impartial trials. It doesn't allow unfair and corrupt trials. That is against the Constitution. It's against the Charter of Rights. It's against international law obligations. It's just wrong. It's clearly wrong. So they made a mistake.
Before proceeding, I just want to explore this a little. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm trying to simplify it for the audience.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that the Judges Act sort of allows judges to have discretion, and in this case, the argument was that the judge had discretion to choose the court order over the court transcript. And I gave the example of the judge said Mr. Holsworth is innocent. The opposing lawyer said you're guilty. What was the exact lie? Like, what was the actual lie?
Oh, I mean, the actual lie was a minor thing. It was basically just the lawyer removed one amount to be paid on the mortgage, and because he wanted to take the funds. So he only wrote one, and the judge had clearly said both mortgages. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the lawyer didn't want to do that because he wanted to steal my money. So it's just these compounding errors, and that, it wasn't a big deal, but it was a big deal by the time it came to the Judicial Council, because obviously if a judge can prefer, or the judge did prefer, a lawyer's fraud over the transcript, so then now we've got a big problem. And then the Judicial Council approved of that conduct. And now we have an even bigger problem, because now you're saying that that's okay for all judges in Canada, and that you won't be disciplined if you do that. So then the fair trial rights of every Canadian have been affected since 2007, when they decided that. And that's what came out when I enforced, I served the enforcement procedure of the charter on the Minister of Justice, David Lametti, back in 2020. And I asked him to take charge of the situation because the Canadian Judicial Council wasn't. And the Minister of Justice is actually the decision maker. The Judges Act just sort of pushes it off to the side and says, hey, judges, you do it. But the Minister of Justice is actually the statutory decision maker that has that authority. He's the one that presents it to Parliament, and Parliament is the one with the authority, Section 99, to remove judges, because the people always are the judge of how they're judged, right? That's just basic statescraft, is that you are serving the people. So Parliament, that's why we have Parliament, is from the Magna Carta. From before that, it was the king saying, you subjects, you do what I tell you. And the people said, or the nobles said, we're not going to put up with that. We're not going to pay you taxes if you don't let us have a voice. And that's what the Magna Carta stood for, is that we have a voice or we don't pay tax. And then during the French Revolution, the same principle happened. Same thing with the American Revolution. They said, you're going to tax us and we don't vote for you. We don't have no rights in the British Parliament. We're not going to pay the tax. So that's what I ended up doing, is the Minister of Justice didn't comply with the enforcement procedure, didn't respond, because they had no argument. They could not justify their conduct.
Trevor, we're skipping ahead a bit. There's a couple of things I was going to ask you before getting to the AG, but on this path, the judiciary it's not actually fully independent. Like even in the U.S., they can still be impeached. So they are the Congress has oversight, and in Canada, the Parliament has oversight. That's an important distinction to make. Correct? Totally.
Yeah. The doctrine of separation of powers is what they always talk about, right? And they talk about the independence of the judiciary. But all those three powers, Parliament, the judiciary, and the executive, they all are supposed to work together to check each other. Parliament checks the conduct of the executive and checks the conduct of the judiciary. The judiciary checks the conduct of the executive and Parliament, and declares laws unconstitutional and executive conduct unconstitutional, right? And so they're supposed to balance each other out. But what has happened over time is that the executive, in the form of the PM and the Minister of Justice, have appointed judges or lawyers to be judges that are partial to them because they appoint them. So of course they're going to appoint people that are partial to them. So that's what's happened over time, is that people that have done the government favors get appointed to be judges, and the entire, well, not the entire, but it's corrupted the judiciary. And Parliament has not stepped in ever to deal with the situation, and they've allowed it to happen. And now we're in the situation we're in.
So, Trevor, thank you for that. Continuing on with your story, I'm gonna read this, and then I'm gonna so you know where I want you to go with this. Mr. Holsworth follows the judge's advice and hires a lawyer. The lawyer colludes with the opposing lawyer to hide evidence, ignore all court orders. They succeed in doing so. Both lawyers manipulate the entire legal file. Can you go into more detail about what these two lawyers did?
Um, what they did do is I had a judge. I was writing. The one judge wasn't. One lawyer wasn't complying with court orders to provide monthly trust account statements, and my lawyer was not doing anything about it. And I kind of finally forced him to go. Well, actually, I'll go back a little bit. I was told by the judge to hire a lawyer to deal with the situation. So I followed the judge's advice and hired a lawyer, who then screwed me over. So got to be careful. How do we talk about this? Yeah, so they were both just they control, like the lawyers control the process, right? So they can delay things or extend things or change things and remove evidence, and this happens all the time. And there's legitimate parts of it, and then there's illegitimate parts of it. You know, the lawyers go through the evidence and they discuss what should be included and what shouldn't be one, but they can also do it to hide evidence, right? And that's what they did in this case, is that they knew that they were going to lose because the evidence was against them. And so that they removed evidence and put in evidence that would, and just redacted and changed evidence and just manipulated the whole file.
Sorry.
And there's no checking of it. So,
Trevor, just to clarify, you said they. Are you talking about the opposing lawyer, your lawyer, or were they just both colluding?
I'm talking about both lawyers. And at the end there, I was writing to both lawyers at the same time, just going, you know, you're both guilty, and, you know, this is going to come out. I was totally warning them that I was going to be pursuing them. There's no prize to them. But, you know, and basically just the one lawyer just wanted to get money out of it. And it wasn't a lot of money. And it's like, you know, he wanted to be paid. But anyhow, I don't really want to dwell with the minor actors, because now we're kind of dealing with a systemic issue where it's not just these lawyers. It can happen all across the board. But you're looking at the sheet there and checking if we've lost track there again. You want to bring me back on track, Payman?
No. You haven't lost track. I was just trying to preempt I'm trying to get ready for my next question, so I don't look like a horrible host.
No problem. Yeah. So, you know, there's an enormous amount of discretion that lawyers have and judges have, and so if you've got no one checking that discretion, how far can different actors go, and what can they do, and how much can they manipulate a court case to create any outcome that they want? And once you have fraud involved, you can do anything, right? You can create any outcome you want.
That's exactly where I was going next. I'm looking at the sort of the script. When the Minister of Justice pleaded with parliamentarians to let the legal system self-regulate, they agreed to do so. And then you went off. You said this is when you believe this was a test by the judiciary to see how far Parliament would allow them to push. And you said Parliament folded like a wet pancake.
Right. So this is one of the worst stories that the Canadian judiciary has ever experienced. And they definitely do not want to ever hear this.
Trevor, you still with us?
Sorry, I dropped off there. I think it was my internet that dropped out there.
Yeah, you were saying this is the worst the judiciary has ever experienced?
Yeah, so Judge Shaw, he declared he had a guy before him who had child pornography on him and this and that. And so he declared, and the guy was trying to make a freedom of expression argument, saying, well, this is for artistic and it's for whatever. And the judge declared the law on child pornography to be unconstitutional, completely. The whole law was unconstitutional, right? Not just that there was an exception for freedom of expression, but the law itself was unconstitutional. So people were outraged, right? Of course, police chiefs, public, everyone wanted the judge gone. It was debated in Parliament February 3rd or February 2nd, 1999. All the parliamentarians were like, get him out of here. We don't want him. Absolutely the worst judge that we can possibly have. Then the Minister of Justice, Anne McClellan, gets up and says, let the judiciary handle it. We'll deal with it. And the Parliament just said, okay, deal with it. And so by doing that, the judiciary and the Minister of Justice tested Parliament to see how far they could get away with protecting a judge doing whatever they wanted to, declaring a law that the people of Canada wanted through Parliament to protect the most vulnerable. And a judge called it, a single judge declared it unconstitutional and threw it out. So that situation is there. And then I'm in court, and I go through my whole divorce story, and it's terrible and horrendous and completely abusive and breaking entries and just traumatic to the max. But I've got a judge that starts to hear my story and starts to see that something's not right. And he seizes control of the case. So they say the judge seizes the case. And so that means that he is the only one that has the authority to deal with it, because he's heard enough of it and he kind of he's taken control of it. So I was pretty content with that, because I kind of had a pretty good feeling about this judge. And then when it came to the trial, he's not there, and this Judge Shaw character is. And I knew nothing about this guy. So I do the trial, and then I get the verdict, and the verdict is pretty bad. And I kind of suffer from PTSD for about 4 or 5 years, and pretty bad way, pretty devastated. I just got no rights. I produced the transcript to correct a court order, and that was the entire reason I went to trial on it. And the judge just throws it out and protects the lawyer. And the Law Society did the same thing, and the Judicial Council did the same thing. They all protect each other. And so then I sat on it for a couple of years, and now I went to the Minister of Justice. And I'm not sure if you want to get me back on track or if I'm still on track now.
You are. We're going, but I have a couple of questions. You said 1999, I believe, the AG goes to Parliament and says, you know what, let us handle this sort of in-house, leave it to the judiciary. Fast forward to today. I don't know the details, but Donald Trump is tackling what they call the out-of-control rogue judiciary in his country. And Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, they're on trial. And Pierre Poilievre came out and he made a statement. He kind of said, this seems like a political witch hunt. And there are people in Canada right now, they're saying the exact same thing that this AG said in 99. Just let the judiciary, handle itself, manage itself. Does this go back to what we were saying earlier, where the judiciary is not completely independent, but people think that it is? And is this started in 99?
Yeah. So, you'll hear from the judiciary all the time, and politicians as well. They'll talk about, the judicial independence, and you can't have politics interfering with the judiciary, because then you have political decisions being made in the courts, and the courts are supposed to be independent. The courts are supposed to be independent of government. They're supposed to be a judge of government conduct between the citizen and and the government. But the reality is in Canada is that all judges are appointed politically by the political party that's in power. The Minister of Justice or the PM appoints all the judges, and the Liberal Party has appointed over 75% of all the judges in Canada now. So that's judicial independence, they say, but it's completely politically biased. But you can't, once they're appointed, then they're supposed to be protected from political influence. But the actual appointment process is completely political. So it's unfair right from the start, right?
No, I get what you're saying. I love hearing this story of yours. It seems like everything is kind of coming into focus, and you cited 1999. I mean, maybe it happened bits and pieces before then too, but was that sort of like the crisis point where the judiciary is like, hey guys, we can get away with anything we want?
Yeah, sorry, you're a little bit broken up there. I didn't quite catch it. But 1999 was really a tipping point because that was this. There was a serious debate in Parliament, and the reality is that Parliament has never removed a judge. Right? Never. There's been times when they've gone through the motions, but a judge has always stepped down, retired, or whatever prior to that happening. So the constitutional power has never been exercised. It's the Parliament, the people's representatives of Canada have never stood up to the judiciary and said, this is wrong. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. But it follows the trend of the Parliament not wanting to do anything because then they have to take responsibility, I suppose.
Yeah, but now they're in the position where they failed to take responsibility, right? With Judge Shaw, they should have removed him. Clear, they all wanted to, but they stepped back for the Minister of Justice, and now they've got the problem back on their doorstep again because they let him continue being a judge. And he did what he did in my case. And now I'm knocking on Parliament's door saying, you're accountable. And I want accountability. And Parliament's like, oh my God, what have we done?
This goes back to what I said at the beginning. It seems like the Holsworth story is weaved into Canada's sort of decline.
Yeah. So then I served the Minister of Justice with the enforcement procedure, asking him to bring this matter to Parliament, and he refused to respond, or the Attorney General refused to respond. They did not respond. So then I went to court, and I had stopped filing income taxes to force the government to take me to court, and then I was going to say, I don't believe you can provide me a fair and impartial trial. Here's the evidence. You've rejected all the evidence that I can ever present. How can I get a fair trial if you reject the transcript? Absolutely can't. So they know that they can't do that under that situation. So they never, that's why they haven't responded. So then I went, and then they rejected my argument in court. And then I appealed it to the BC Supreme Court, and I asked for a writ of mandamus, which is an order from the court for an official to do their duty, which for the Minister of Justice is to ensure that the administration is in compliance with the law and that the public is being protected. And clearly the public is not being protected if fraud is allowed in our legal system and corruption is allowed in the judges.
Trevor, let's give it a few moments. It's like the The Judicial Council is attacking your Wi-Fi. Oh, we lost Trevor. See if there's any comments. Man, there's a lot of comments. Dude. What was your first indication that your lawyer? Sue, I'll ask this question. That's a question. The entire system is a fraud. Fraud ab initio. I'm not familiar with that Latin term. Yeah. He's having some internet problems. Love the shirt and tie payment, my brother. Thanks. The shirt's mine. If I put on a few more pounds, it won't fit. But the tie is my dad's. My ties are usually cheap ties. The Truth Table reminds me of that other podcaster. What was his name? Paul Everton. Yeah, I've heard good things about that guy. He's a great musician. It's not just unfair; it's fraudulent. All right, Trevor's back.
Yeah, sorry, I think my internet dropped off there.
No worries, Trevor. We got you back.
Yeah.
I don't recall where you were, but I was going to mention one thing. So maybe this will remind you. You skipped a step. Can you hear me?
You look frozen there, Raymond. You look, yeah, like a picture. Very
Can you
good.
hear me though? Can you hear me, Trevor? Now you're frozen, Trevor. Dude. Time to go back to the comments. 1982 was the major tipping point when the charter was shackled around our necks. Yeah. I agree with you. Everybody knows that, and it's coming into better focus as to why exactly the mechanics are that are causing that. But people are talking about it a lot. That guy on the Truth Table seems to love you, bro. Really? I think Peyton is the Paul Everton. It's just from Rumble. I love the tie payment. Yeah. Guest freezes live. Yeah. There's okay, you can talk to me, Payman. What was it like being on the Truth Table? It was good. There was a lot of truth around the table. I don't know if it's StreamYard that's causing the freezing or if it's his Wi-Fi. I'm going to go ahead and say it's his Wi-Fi. Riverside is even worse than StreamSide. Could also be the government. It's the Judicial Council. His connection is worse than mine. Sue, I was going to mention this on your space the other day. If you get fiber and you continue to have connection problems, I would put you on suicide watch because that could be the last straw that breaks your back. I mean, waiting this long for fiber and the problem is actually you. What is the forward moment vis-a-vis Alberta separation? Any updates? I don't know if that's a question I can ask Trevor, but I'm doing a podcast with Bruce Party and James Lindsay about this. I think the 9th, so Saturday. I could put that, join that, and I'll ask that. Could be many factors. Agreed. I'm not suicidal. I don't know, man. If they might find you hanging in your jail cell somewhere. So it's good to announce that. Sue, what was your question? What was your first indication that your lawyer was acting in bad faith? What are red flags? It's a good question. If we can ever get Trevor back, I'll ask him that. I should probably check my messages. Maybe he's trying to message me. No, nothing in the messages. I should probably get rid of that question. Yeah, man, anytime. None of the podcasters ever really reach out to me. I think it's just a lazy thing amongst podcasters. We prefer to have new guests as opposed to recurring ones. But yeah, anytime you want me on, just send me a message. The entire system has been rigged. Yeah, like 4 years ago, even a year ago, I would have said that's conspiratorial. But that's really what's happened, and that's why I have Trevor on. I mean, he's been on the receiving end of this, and he's got concrete examples of how the system is rigged, not just you and me talking about it. Yeah, anytime. You need some background music. Oh, Trevor's back. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, I'm back. I think
no worries. I was checking the questions.
Right.
So we left off somewhere. I was going to say, I'm reading some here. Mr. Holsworth, you skipped this step. Mr. Holsworth then writes numerous times to the Judicial Council suggesting that they reconsider However, the judge retires and the counsel claims the matter is closed. This is mootness, right? It's the same sort of argument.
Yeah, basically. I mean, yeah, the council basically has the job to judge whether or not the judge should be removed. And so if the judge steps down, then that sort of ends the process. But they'd already said that judges could protect lawyers committing fraud by that time. So didn't really matter to me or to the public that Judge Shaw stepped down. The fact was that the Judicial Council had said, and still maintains that position today. I have the BC Court of Appeal judge directly claiming to me in oral argument that judges can protect lawyers committing fraud by rejecting the transcript. They are that certain of their power that they won't be checked, that they feel emboldened enough to say that.
While you were disconnected, I was chatting with the audience, and they're basically saying the same thing. Like, there's just the whole system is corrupted. Mm-hmm. Trevor, moving it along, 3 points here. One, you mentioned you kind of took it up with the Attorney General. He did nothing, and then you said you took it to the Prime Minister, who conferred with the Attorney General. The Attorney General lied about his responsibilities. You called out the Attorney General, and after that, AG stopped talking to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Because he knew the response that I provided was enough that he knew that that I knew what I was talking about, and so his response was to just ignore me. And I think Canadians have seen a lot of that lately. So we're very familiar with that kind of conduct. Is we're in a difficult position, we just ignore the public. So then what happened next? Where are we on my list there, Payman?
I think after that, you take it to court, and something the AG doesn't respond or something.
Right. Okay. That's the mandamus, or I asked constitutional questions as well. So I did everything. I did all the right steps all along the way at the right time. Did all the right procedures, and so I did the mandamus. The judge. This is where it gets interesting. December 3rd, 2021, I'm presenting my evidence to the BC Supreme Court, and the judge is quite taken aback because, well, they thought I was doing two things. The first thing was they thought that I was seriously challenging the constitutionality of the Income Tax Act, because I was challenging two things. The constitutional question I asked was, why isn't the Minister of Justice responding to the enforcement procedure of the Charter? And is the Income Tax Act constitutional? And I really only asked that question because I was in court, and there was a possibility. Well, I mean, the maximum that they could sentence me was 7 years, right? So I was like, well, I don't want to go to jail for 7 years. I'm going to challenge the constitutionality of the Income Tax Act on the imprisonment part, because the law that is written is unconstitutional. And I didn't know this at the time. I just was looking at it and was like, well, this is imprisonment with an absolute liability offense, and that's what different case law says. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll present that argument. And the Attorney General's come back to me. They never respond to my constitutional question, right? Never respond. And in court, their argument is no comment. And the judge...
How is that an argument?
It's no argument. They have no argument. They absolutely have no argument. I present argument. The Attorney General has no argument. And the judge rules against me and says, well, look, I know that the act is constitutional. It's been challenged many, many times, and I'm just going to ignore you, and I'm going to rule against you, right? Once again, judges ignoring every evidence and just doing whatever they want. So then I get to and they're still thinking that I'm seriously challenging the Income Tax Act. But the reality is, and Canadians should know it, it is unconstitutional. And what the judges did is they created a little loophole that only lawyers know about, where they create a due diligence defense. And they say, well, we wrote it in, right? They just created an act of parliament by making a decision. Instead of declaring the Income Tax Act unconstitutional and telling Parliament that they need to fix it, they just created a loophole that lawyers know. But, because the Attorney General didn't respond, there's no argument. So then I take that to the BC Court of Appeal, and they say, screw you. We're going to do whatever we think. And then the judge totally said in court, yeah, judges can protect lawyers committing fraud. And so that ended the matter. And in the court system in British Columbia, I can't do anything in BC because they just say, well, we're going to ignore everything you say. And right, so then the decision on the writ of mandamus was scheduled for February 14th, 2022. And I've been writing to police, Parliament, everyone, and telling them about the problem. So the police were well informed. I'd written to the RCMP National Division and reported the Minister of Justice failing to respond to the enforcement procedure. And I have quite a long email conversation with them and explain the whole situation. Eventually, they just say, do not send more evidence. We will not investigate, and we will destroy your evidence. And so that kind of ended my conversation with them. And but anyhow, February 14th rolls around, and the judge doesn't show up to court, and nobody knows. The judge that was there doesn't know anything about it, and I don't know anything about the Freedom Convoy myself at all, right? And then a couple months later, I'm like thinking about this, and I'm starting to look at all the dates. And I realize, you think about it from the government's perspective. Here you got a guy in BC who's saying quite correctly that the administration is not in compliance with the law and they have no business enforcing the law. And I'm reporting this to police, the local police, the RCMP, the National Division. I'm speaking it out in the public and reporting it to the police. And then you have the Freedom Convoy marching to Ottawa, demanding their rights. Of course, they thought that that there's some connection, or how are we going to enforce this? Or, you've got a mass of people complaining about the charter being broken, and they know that it is. And the Minister of Justice directly knows that he's not complying with the charter. And there's actually a court hearing into the legality of his conduct coming, and they enforce the Emergencies Act, right? It is absolutely shocking, right? That's what the Minister of Justice, David Lametti, did. Knowing that his accountability was being requested in the legal system, he declared martial law to rid the protesters and get rid of it all.
Can you tie that together? Are you saying that either they invoked martial law so they wouldn't have to take you to court, or that was kind of a bonus, so martial law would postpone your case?
No, I don't. It really wasn't really about my case. That was just the government's reaction. They overreacted because of all of this going on. You had the Freedom Convoy protesters. That's why they had the whole narrative about misogynists and men, and they were there to denigrate any of the protesters because they knew that it was actually a serious threat. I'd been writing to the Governor General declaring this as well, right? I wrote to the Governor General and provided very good legal argument why she should not allow the Liberal NDP party to form a government, because they were operating government unconstitutionally. You don't hear about that in the media, right? You hear about the MOU presented by James Bollitter, but my communication with the Governor General was a month prior to that, right? You do not hear about it at all. So and then the lawsuit against the Freedom Convoy, that was pre-planned. The lawyer did not create that in 5 days at the Freedom Convoy. They created it ahead of time. They planned it to remove the assets from the protest to control the protest. So they knew all this stuff was going to happen, and they were taking significant efforts to shut it down.
Sorry, Trevor, when you say the lawsuit, you're talking about the bank freeze?
Yeah, what's the lawyer's name? The Zexi Lee lawsuit seizing the $300 million, right?
Okay, got it.
That lawsuit was created in 5 days, but it was pre-planned.
Similar on this topic, could you also speak to the Public Order Emergency Commission? You say you submitted your documents to them as well? Oh no, we lost you.
There we are. I'm back again.
Okay.
I follow the Judges Act through, watched every debate, submitted my evidence to Parliament, ignored. And then during POAC, I submitted my evidence of the communications that I'd had with the Minister of Justice and the Prime Minister, and they appeared nowhere in the evidence. I have confirmation that they were received. So when David Lametti got up on the stand in front of Justice Rollo and says that he invoked the Emergencies Act in good faith, I know absolutely that that is false, because he lied to me. And he knew that he was not in compliance with the law, and he knew that he was protecting judges and not protecting the Canadians. So he absolutely was failing in his duties. He was absolutely not conducting himself in good faith. And so when I heard that, I was just floored. So then I go to jail, which was really, they were trying to shut me down, right? They just like, we're going to give this guy, boom, he's going to shut up if we send him to jail. I came out from jail and I go talk to the judge again. I'm like, yeah, well, I applied for a habeas corpus from the Supreme Court of Canada. And the Supreme Court of Canada just didn't respond. And then when I pressed them, when I got out, they said, oh, it's a letter. It's like, well, it says writ of habeas corpus on the front. Attorney General of Canada. And so then I also supplied my evidence as an intervener in the Emergencies Act before the Federal Court of Appeal. So you notice that Justice Mosley came out and said that the conduct was illegal, unconstitutional, and unreasonable. I presented my evidence, which includes the minister and the Minister of Justice, obviously not doing his duty and protecting judges instead. And so I get denied that evidence. It gets tossed out. And
sorry, Trevor, I got to slow you down again.
Sure.
You submit an intervener application. What is an intervener application?
So an intervener application is, you're not the main party to the court case, but you have evidence that will help the court in making its determination. And so the evidence that I had was directly of the enforcement of the Emergencies Act. So it was definitely in the public interest that it be heard. But it also disclosed the fact that, that the judges, my whole judges story, which the court definitely did not want to be brought up. So they just shuffled it off to the side.
Sorry, Trevor, another question. What is the FCA on Emergencies Act?
Right. So that's the Federal Court of Appeal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I should sort of, philosophy and human psychology and politics and legal studies was mine in my teenage years. And I did 2 years of law school. And so I had some training, definitely not enough. And then I had a massive amount of trauma from the legal. I could not even speak. I could not even speak because I was so traumatized from my prior experience. So it has been, but anyhow, yeah, whereabouts are we now? Payment?
So skipping over the minutia of the court case, we are at, as soon as Jagmeet Singh announced he was no longer supporting the Liberal Party, you wrote to every single MP, informed them of your intention to serve them directly with the enforcement procedure of the Charter to bring judicial and executive accountability to Parliament.
Right. So my entire mission was to present this to Parliament, and that's still my goal, is for Parliament to check the conduct of the judiciary in the public interest. That's the role the Minister of Justice should have done, but he hasn't. And so then my next step is, well, okay, I'll get every member of Parliament and I'll serve every member of Parliament, and we'll go there. But I couldn't do that while the Liberal Party had the confidence of the NDP. So I was waiting for that to happen. And I'd been communicating with every single committee in my Parliament, doing all the right stuff anyway. So then as soon as Jagmeet says, no, we're going to no confidence, I write to every single member of Parliament and I say, I'm going to be serving you with the enforcement procedure of the Charter. I'm going to give you a chance to resolve it without me taking this constitutional step. Here's the evidence. And I presented a ton of evidence, about 100 pages of evidence that shows the problem. And we dropped out. And then December 12th, Larry Brock puts a motion to Parliament for the Minister of Justice to supply the reasons for enforcing the Emergencies Act, because that has never been provided, not to the courts, not to Parliament, not to anyone. The legal reasons. When they were in the Senate, they were questioning Arif Virani, and he claims solicitor-client privilege on supplying that legal reason, right? So they need something wrong. The reason that there's something wrong in it is because it has my stuff in it that they don't want to come out. So I write to every member of Parliament. Larry Brock saying we want to hold the Minister of Justice in contempt of Parliament, and then Trudeau prorogues Parliament to prevent debate into the legality of his conduct and into the legality of the conduct. Every single leader of in the Parliament of all the different parties had said we're going to vote non-confidence in Trudeau. So he knew it was over. So he prorogued, and then I waited until the prorogation argument was heard by the federal court. It had never been argued before that the legality of prorogation should be checked. So I didn't want to get involved in that because I really didn't want to give the judiciary any extra power. So I let someone else do it. They argued the prorogation stuff and did a great job. And the court came back and said, yes, of course we can check if the conduct is illegal, because that's what the court's job is, right? Is to check legality. And so I was like, good, right on, okay. Showing that the executive conduct was illegal. And so I do that as an intervener. And I'd learned a little bit from my previous experience with the Emergencies Act, and I knew and I had my argument pre-planned and prepared to defeat their argument, which is kind of how they defeated the Emergencies Act there. And it was deceitful, to be honest, what the attorney generals did. They have what they've done is that they've made a maze out of the system. They can do that and make it look legitimate, but it is absolutely obstruction. But anyhow, I got through that maze. So it goes before the court, and the court determines whether or not they want it to appear. and they got full discretion, whether they want it or not, and there's not a lot you can do about it. You're not the main person of the court case. You're just adding additional evidence. So anyway, they said, no, we don't want your evidence, and they provided no reasons for rejecting it, no argument, just dismissed. So then at that point in time, I've kind of gone through everything. I've gone through all the court system of Canada into Parliament. There's no further way to go, right? And that's sort of where we are now.
So I guess where you want to go with this is the UN. But before you go there, there's a perception in Canada that the reason that they prorogued Parliament is exclusively because of the Green Slush Fund scandal with Guilbeault. You're saying it was also, or mostly, in addition to, it was a constitutional issue with Lametti?
Well, I mean, they were trying to hide executive conduct and the judicial conduct in a maze of scandals, right? You know, he had the SNC Lavalin scandal, he had all sorts of scandals, right? So, but for prorogation is that he was conducting himself illegally, both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice, and they should be, Parliament should hold them to account. There's proroguing, but there was definitely build-up pressure from me and from the Shadow Minister of Justice, Larry Brock, saying we want accountability. And also all the leaders of the saying we're not there. So, you know, there is, you know, how much was influence? Who knows? What was the major factor or the minor factor? But it was a factor.
So I just want to clarify this. A scandal is when you steal some money, you do some bribes. It's not that big of a deal. We're talking about like cancer of our institutions here. The entire judiciary is falling apart.
Yeah. To have a corrupt judiciary than it is to have an honest judiciary, right? Because if people are trying to access justice, it doesn't make a lot of money. But if it's really hard, you can make more money.
I guess, Trevor, sorry, you keep going. You froze there.
And also it immunizes the executive and if you work together with the judiciary. And so then there's sort of a natural alliance between the executive and the judiciary. People don't really know, but Richard and Chief Justice Wagner and a number of other, David Eby and the Attorney General Nikki Sharma of BC and a number of other actors were all meeting all through this period from 2020 onward to 2023. They were meeting in private, closed door room meetings between executive and the judiciary, right? You talk about separation of powers and independent judiciary, and you've got secret meetings going on between them. It is absolutely. So that's, yeah, you know, and lots of people have experienced that. And, you know, when I started in this process 7 years ago or 5 years ago, when I really got stuck into it, I was like, you know, the legal system is pretty well respected. You know, we have good institutions. Is people even gonna, you know, what's going to be the crazy? You know, and then it's like, it's absolutely nuts out there right now. Yeah, and then we got to look at solutions. Really commend you on taking this step with the People's Parliament. I haven't really looked into the whole steps of what you're doing there, but I commend you for initiative on that. You know, the democracy is you have the right to change your legal landscape, right? If the legal system is not functioning the way you want it, we have the power to say we want it changed. We want it to be different. We want a different system. We're not locked in a democracy to having. And so we can create options for ourselves. So that really is the next step. And so I'm really stoked that you guys are looking at also. That's when you have a completely corrupted government. We you probably have some background history from Iran as well, I guess. Payment their story to the whole Iranian story.
We've come full circle. Iran is Canada's turning into the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah,
we're Canada's turned into the country I ran away from.
It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous.
So for the audience, skipping ahead, hopefully we have to work on scheduling and timing, but Mr. Holsworth will be coming back to the People's Parliament next month, and he will hold our hand, and he's going to walk us through the Judges Act, and we're going to explore that and explain that for the audience, and we're really excited to have you on there as well. So thanks for agreeing to come on.
You bet. Yeah. So I did a bit of research onto because you're talking about what are the important acts, right? And I sort of, it's like, what are our governing acts, right? Because we were talking about governing, right? And so our Constitution governing that we have, and then the Charter of Rights is a second governing. That's the relationship between all the government actors, the executive and the judiciary and Parliament, and then the statutes below that, which are the Judges Act, which regulates the conduct of judges. And then you have the Public Service Act, which regulates servants. And you have the Act of Parliament, which regulates the conduct of Parliament, right? So every actor has a statute that governs, and they're supposed to operate within that parameters. And if you had Parliament passing laws that were unconstitutional, or just you would have the judges coming in there going, say, no, you can't do that, right? So there's systems there. But anyhow, every act has its purpose. So of absolute importance in the governing of Canada, for sure.
Trevor, before I let you go, there's some questions from the audience. Sue Kellen Dyer asks, what was your first indication that your lawyer was acting in bad faith? What are red flags?
Well, when they, if they can't give you an answer and they don't respond and they're not communicating, and I knew that I had a major problem, but what was I? You're completely powerless in that situation. And what I would say to Sue is present yourself. If you can't trust, but it's so screwed. So if you're up against a lawyer and you're a non-screwed, so it's like a catch-22. You're screwed either way, right? You're going to get screwed by your lawyer if you hire a lawyer, and you're going to get screwed by a lawyer if you don't hire a lawyer. So they know that they've got you screwed. But yeah, it's the same as dealing with anybody.
All right, that's actually the only question we have. The only other relevant topic is someone in the comments pointed out that Katy Perry is dating Justin Trudeau.
Of course. I can't believe that. I saw that before I came in, and I was like, Katy Perry, because when I started in on this, I was following. I started on Twitter with what's his name, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, right? Because here we had a major conflict between sort of men and women, and who do you believe more, and all that kind of stuff. So Katy Perry, I thought she provided evidence in support of Johnny Depp. So I'm kind of I don't know. I'm very surprised that she's dating or went out to dinner even with Justin Trudeau, but I guess we just don't want. But yeah, really nice chatting with you, Payman, and I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, setting up, having conversations with people and talking about these issues and talking about a people's parliament, just generating conversation, because that's the important thing that we need to do is understand where we're all at. Everyone has a slightly different story, but we all play a part in this, and we just need to communicate with, just like yeah, just, you know, we just, if we can be good to each other, then we can step out of this. That's our problem here.
Well, Trevor, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you so much on behalf of all of Canada, and all Canadians. Thank you for, sacrificing and struggling and learning along the way, so that you can come on these shows and educate the rest of us. The amount that the cost to you, the price you've had to pay is, I don't want to ever have to understand that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been 5 years of full-time work, Payman. It's I took it on as a serious endeavor. I knew it was a serious issue, and I knew that it was going to take serious effort. And so I went into it with eyes wide open on the amount of work that it was going to be. But I also knew that I had the support network, and I also had the who would, and you would just have this judiciary just completely out of control. And so just, yeah, looking for accountability.
Well, Trevor, I'm just going to hold you over until after the live stream. But again, thank you very much to you, and a big thank you to the audience. Take care.